Okay, any questions or comments? Feel free.
On that bruise, can we detect that immediately with the catechol, or is that type of, we could have black spot bruising that will not be detected? I use the word catechol.
Okay, catechol is a dye.
Correct, but can we detect that with catechol or
No.
not necessarily?
No. Catechol is a dye that will penetrate cracks or holes in the skin and stain the white flesh below it. So when you peel them, here's these orange or reddish colored marks where the dye got in. The black spot bruise has no entry point for the catechol to get in. If you want to track your bruise, and I think probably that's a good thing to do, one method that we use quite a bit in the West is take 5-gallon buckets and drill some 2-inch holes in all 4 sides and the bottom so air can move in and out of them. Collect samples in these buckets, put them in like a U-Haul rental truck with a heater in there up to 110 degrees overnight, and it accelerates the blackening of the damage. So by the next morning, you can run those through a peeler and get a very good indication of your bruise free. We do that a lot with the processors because there's big money involved in the incentives for bruise free. And some years, not too long ago, the price of potatoes was so low that all your profit was in the bruise incentives. The rest of it was just to pay for what you spent.
So you would keep those potatoes in that temperature for 12 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Or before?
12.
12 hours should bring it. And then,
Yeah.
And then can we detect that peeling with a carrot peeler?
Yeah, you could, but a steam peeler or a lye peeler is much, much faster.
Yeah.
So if you don't have such a thing, having 2 trucks, run one to a processing plant where they can peel these samples for you and give you readouts is an option that can work. That's done in the West quite a bit. Those inspectors are very good at what they do. They're trained well, and they do a nice job of it. And they don't know whose samples or whatever the case might be. Now, one motivating approach that guys out there have used very successfully is each sample is identified with a specific harvester. So there's a load ticket from the harvester that goes to the truck comes in, unloads, samples collected, a ticket is made out for that bucket for which digger it came from, and those are graded the next day. So by 7 or 8 o'clock the next morning, every harvester operator knows what his bruise-free numbers were for the day before. And the guy with the best bruise-free, he gets to put a flag on his tractor. And you would not believe how hard they'll work for that flag. I got something you don't. And what they did, in addition to that, they were getting $1, this is a while back, $1 per percentage point for each improvement in bruise per ton. 5 cents of that dollar went to the operator who dug that load if his numbers were high enough. And 76% bruise-free was the cutoff, so you had to be above 76. And I was working on the other side of that, kind of tracking the progress, and we'd get a call 5 o'clock in the morning, hey, Jose's digger, something wrong yesterday. He says he's not going to roll it until you guys get out there and find out where the problem is. So they wouldn't even take their machine to the field and begin harvesting until we went and checked it and found out what the problem was yesterday and fixed it. And so the bruise on that farm, that was a big farm. I worked there for about 12 years, 14,000 acres of potatoes. And the farm average the last 3 years I was there was around 92% bruise-free.
I was going to ask the next question. How much did you accomplish? And that's the number.
Yeah. We started out in the high 60s, low 70s. And And that's kind of where the industry was when this. It took us about 5 years to figure out how to deal with this bruise because nobody had ever looked at it. It wasn't an issue. Suddenly it was.
Here we call it hot boxing, and some people have taken refrigerators, a couple of refrigerators, and just put some light heat in them.
Yeah.
And they just put trays in each slot, and then they peel them by hand or whatever. So
Yeah.
they just put a heater in a refrigerator so it heats up overnight.
Depends on your volume.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you got 2 or 3 or 4 diggers running, you're going to need more capacity. But
Most farms have one. So.
okay. So yeah. Looking to get the numbers that tell you what you need to know to make good decisions is the critical step. And that sets the most successful growers apart from the rest. They're looking at that stuff. They got that information and they're making decisions based on it. And that's why they're in that top 10% group within the region.
Many different places where you can measure it here. I'll just use some equipment for a moment, but I'll just say behind the windrow or between the rows, that's the number one. I'll just start there for a moment.
Okay.
Then through the harvest or on the truck at the end of the boom. Then what steps do you go from there? I mean, we have trucks to dirt eliminators and so on and so on.
Okay.
Through the channel.
I can give you an idea of what we did on that big farm because we didn't know where the bruise was coming from for sure. We went out and hand dug boxes and boxes of potatoes and 200 or 300 boxes. So they were virtually bruise free because we dug them out of coarse sand by hand and the sand falls off there just like they were washed. And we would take those and paint them fluorescent orange or whatever color you happen to want to do that day, and go out and put them in the ground in front of the digger, and he'd go digging through there and we'd climb up in the truck and retrieve them. So all the way around this digger, there's a sample. Then we'd put some more in. When they got to the drop above the top of the primary, we stopped the machine, went and collected them. Then we went back to the rear cross and collected another set. And then to the side elevator, and then up to the boom, and then into the truck so we know how much bruise is occurring at each point around that machine. And that gave us priorities as to where we need to focus first. Solve those and then look at the lesser ones as we go. And then at the other end, as the truck's unloading, all the equipment that gets it into the pile. So if you got a weak link somewhere, it's going to mess up all the efforts that you did up to that point. And so it's not just one spot, it's a whole bunch that you got to check and find out, you know, if you pull a sample off the harvester, right out of the truck, right off the boom, and you get some number, okay, we're getting 20% bruise on this digger today. What do? Well, don't even know where it's happening. So we got to go start looking to see where things are occurring. And when you do that, you see some pretty interesting things. Then when you unload that storage and put it in a truck to move it to where it's going, we took colored potatoes and put them on the face of the pile. The scooper would come in, take them, put them in the truck. When it was cold outside, it was below freezing, but not a lot, probably in the mid-20s. We found as many as 16 thumbnail cracks per tuber, because we're going from a warm storage to a cold air outside in the truck.
For a few minutes.
It only takes 5 minutes and the surface of that tuber has cooled, but the core hasn't. And so we put the tarps on the truck, stuck the boom in under them. We didn't get full loads, but we didn't have that far to go. We got about 75 or 80% of a load because the tarp was in the road. And most of that problem went away. Then we went and looked at the wash water in the fresh shed and made sure it was the same temperature as the pulp of the tubers that were going through it. And we got rid of a whole bunch more. And then we looked at how they're dropping into the bags and how they're dropping into the cartons and how they're handling the bales and the burlaps, stacking them on pallets. And there's just all kinds of places for damage to occur, but you got to find them before you can fix them. And that's the challenge. Where do you look? And when an operation is going really well, everybody's talking to each other. If there's a problem, well, we'll go fix it. We're a team. We'll find out what we have to do and make it work. If things are not going well, you're struggling. It's his problem, not mine. You're always pointing fingers at somebody else. Wasn't me. So that good line of communication, that team joint effort, is what makes the whole system work so smoothly. And that's something I can't teach.
It must be a terminology, but how many degree differences? I don't know how to ask the question, but what's the degree differences to time? Like, let's say if you got 15 degree difference in 2 minutes.
How fast does they change cooling or warming?
1 degree difference in an hour. Are they comparable?
Well, yeah, the greater the warm to the cold or the cold to the warm, the greater that difference, the quicker the surface of that potato will change temperature. And if it's going from a warm to a cool, the surface is cooling, it wants to shrink or compress, but the core won't let it. So you get a tension there and a little thump, and that ripple goes out and it finds a weak spot and it makes that crack.
Cells tear, die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the opposite occurs from
Yeah.
cold to warm. Is that equally as damaging?
No, no. If you were taking potatoes out of 40 degree and putting them into 60 degree, there'd be no thumbnail cracks at all, because we have a different process going on there. So it's a case of finding the problem and then finding a solution. And with this many heads in here, there's probably 5 or 6 really good ideas on how to address each issue you come up with. So I'm sure you can solve them. It's just you got to know what to solve first. And when all that happens, hey, it's fun. Farming on a nasty day is not fun, but farming on a really nice day, that's great. Really enjoy that. Same thing if things are working right or they're not working right, it's a fun day or a not day. And it shouldn't be not fun. It doesn't have to be. Okay, any questions or comments? Please feel free. Let me demonstrate some cushioning materials. There's places on equipment where you can put cushioning that will help. Now, regular belting, this happens to be a little thin compared to most belting, but regular rubber belting is not a cushion. Now, if I were trying to convince you of that, I think I know one way to do it. I'd go up here to this concrete wall, and I'd put it here against the wall, and I'd say, hit it with your forehead. Then we'll talk about cushioning. So belting by itself is not a good cushion. But there are materials that are quite good. This is the same kind of thing that's in a cushion in a couch or a chair or something. It's open-celled foam, not a good cushion, because the air in those cells, when you compress it, bleeds out very quickly. So just to illustrate that, here's a ball bearing. Kind of bottomed out, didn't it? So the potato would do the same thing. There are some coatings you can put over this kind of foam that trap the air inside, and it becomes a very good cushion. It's really inexpensive. The coatings are 2-part materials. You spray them on with an airless spray gun so you don't get bubbles, so it's smooth. We coat the slopes, and if we have boards in the bottom of the truck, we coat those. Some trucks do and some don't. The slopes in particular, some guys will do partial sidewalls, a few will do the whole sidewall in each truck bed. The coating is extremely durable. Where I found it was the railroads have a terrible time with grain eating its way through steel. On the grain cars and the augers where they fill them, the grain is so abrasive it just eats holes through the steel. And so they found this coating that they could spray on there, and they got 10 times the life out of their equipment. And once it starts to wear through, you just respray it. Next day it's ready to run again. So they're very effective materials. This material is called No Bruise. It came out of the U.S.'s National Bruise Council about 10 or 15 years ago. It was the one they picked. And it's a cushion. Did you see what happened when it hit? Came back. You got a flow of potatoes going down, one hits and heading the other direction for the next one to collide with. That doesn't solve your problem. So you want them to cushion but not rebound. This material, this closed cell urethane foam, has very similar properties. It's got rebound, so it's not a good place for potatoes to be landing, because they're going to, some of them fly back the opposite direction and collide with the next ones coming. This material is an elastomer. It's not a rubber, it's an elastomer. It's a different kind of material. And it has different properties. Oops. In this thickness, you can see it bounced about that high. That's too much. Here's a 1/4 inch thick piece of it. It doesn't wear real well. Sand and soil will eat its way through it fairly quickly in less than a season. But you take a piece of 1/16 inch neoprene rubber and contact cement them together. The factory can do that for you. This is a very good wear surface. Belting just doesn't wear through. Lasts for years. Now I can drop that piece like I did the others. It bounced about that high. And part of that was the table given. Let me see if I can try it over here. Here's an 1/8 inch of it on the concrete floor. Do you hear it bottom out? An 1/8 inch of that will cushion a 16-ounce potato in a 48-inch fall with no damage. The product is called Poron, P-O-R-O-N, and it's still available. You check with some of the rubber companies. It used to be the preferred material for the liners in professional football helmets, because those folks were very concerned about head injuries. That's a big deal to them. The players get head injuries, they're out. So that's what they were using, because it absorbs the energy of impact. And it does so like nothing else I've found. I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of products trying to find those that had a good fit. And so far, nothing has done better than this. So if you don't want to use the teardrop cushion on the back wall of the rear cross on the harvester or the side caster, you can contact cement this stuff there.
How porous is it?
It doesn't soak up water. It's a closed cell. And I don't know what the cost is today. I'm going to say 8 to 10 years ago it was $1 a square foot. But it doesn't take very long for a square foot of it to start making you money, like 10 minutes in terms of bruise reduction. So the back wall, the rear cross, the side wall where the rear cross is taking them toward that direction, that outside wall of the base of the side elevator is another place for this. And up on top of the picking table where the side elevator could be pushing them clear to that wall is a good place for it. we did quite a bit of work with that stuff in fresh pack sheds, and almost, but not quite, eliminated all the bruise in the fresh line. The biggest problem we had was the devices that tipped the boxes that started receiving potatoes, the cartons, and they'd go down by a spring until they were full. We couldn't get rid of that drop. So there was no way to cushion that part of it. But all the equipment, the sizing and the separating for sizes and everything, we virtually eliminated all the bruising in the fresh shed. And we switched from sizing chain to variable space roller sizers. The sizing chain had a little bit of shake to it, so it'd get potatoes to get where they could fall through, and that bouncing and those little clamps that held the links of the chain together had sharp edges on them. So we went to the rolling sizer, where you can drop out of different sizes, and that took care of all that. So there's more than one right way to do almost everything. The real question is, which one is easiest and most compatible with your goals and objectives in the situation you have? And it's easier to fix a problem in a system that's already in place than it is to start over and design a whole new set of equipment, and that's very expensive to do. So I'm not suggesting that you should tear anything out. Just find out where your damage is occurring and address it, and find a practical solution that's durable enough to last a reasonable amount of time. Any questions on the cushioning? One thing we found with this stuff when we glued it to the beds of the trucks, that smooth rubber is very easy to sanitize. Get in there with a pressure washer, wash it down good, spray it with a disinfectant, then we put our cut seed in it. If you look at the sanitation in seed cutting, most everybody is pretty up to speed on spraying the cutter with some sort of a disinfectant now and then. Well, that's once an hour or twice a day or between seed lots or whatever you choose. Trying to keep from spreading a problem farther than it needs to go, isolating it and making it go away. The sanitation efforts on the cutter are very justifiable. But how often do you clean your seed treater, your auger or your duster? Or the elevator that loads the truck? Or the truck? Or the loader out in the field? Or the planter? If you don't do all of those as often as you do your seed cutter, you really haven't done anything. It's kind of like going in for an operation. The doc says, I got one brand new clean scalpel. The rest of them I just operated on this guy that died from some kind of a horrible plague, but we're going to use those on you too. So if you got dirty instruments in your system, you're not stopping the spread of a problem that might occur.
We potentially have a disinfectant our seed cutter planter for quarantinable pests. So
Okay.
I.e. bacteria, ring rot, or what have you. But we haven't been doing it for other reasons. And is there other bacteria that are causing yield reduction? I don't even know what they are.
Well, the bacterial soft rot, the Erwinia organism, is very contagious. It's a slimy, gooey thing, and if you happen to cut a seed piece on your cutter with it, there's a pretty good chance that quite a number, maybe hundreds of seed pieces afterwards, may get a cell or two, enough to start a new colony and rot that seed piece. So there are not very many real good virus suppressing products out there. When we get to viruses, we got other issues. Basically, if you buy a problem, you live with it. You can't make it go away. The fungi, we've got a pretty good arsenal of products we can use to address various or several kinds of those. The bacteria are a little bit more challenging, but there are some good disinfectants out there that work fine on them. If you're spraying with a disinfectant on metal or rubber or truck beds or whatever it happens to be, the surfaces need to be wet with that disinfectant for no less than 10 continuous minutes, because it takes that long to kill these pathogens. Now, when you think of the seed growers, you go visit a seed grower and you kind of want to go in and look at his storage. What's the pile look like? Well, come on in. We go through the door. And, oh, I got a pan here. Okay, let's go. You didn't do a thing except get your shoes wet. You did not disinfect. You got to stand in that pan for 10 minutes. Soak your toes. To do any good, realistically. He's doing it because he wants you to think how conscientious he is, and he might be. But what he did doesn't get the job done. And so if you have situations where sanitation is important, and you've got products you can put on to address those difficulties, make sure they're wet for 10 minutes. Some of them are fairly corrosive. So once they've sat for 10 minutes and done their thing, get the hose out and rinse them off. Or next morning you'll have a rusty looking machine. And that doesn't really help you. Rust is a very porous material. It holds a lot of pathogens in its pores and can spread them for quite a while. So you don't want rust on stuff that's going to contact your potatoes. So,
the best thing for boot protection is disposable covers, like just a
or rubber boots.
rubber boots.
You know, some guys have a whole string of different sizes sitting inside the seed storage. And what size are you? Oh, I'm an 8. So, well, here's your 8. Put those on. Now go step in the bucket, and we'll talk for a minute while you're soaking. And then you can walk around the building, and you don't do him any harm, and you haven't hurt yourself either. So it just depends on how committed you are to accomplishing the task that you're considering. And anytime you do a half a job, you get a half a benefit. So there's reasons why one should go the extra mile, make sure it's done as good as you're capable of doing it. Anything else? Come on, guys.
On your primary beds and the harvesters, I use the word single width and double width. In the past, on primaries, most of them were the width of your row, or 30-inch primary, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think to 34. I should know my numbers, but something like that. So we have 34-inch primary, and then the ones that we call double, there's 72, or I forget the number now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just a multiple of 2.
Mm-hmm. 68 plus a couple of, for the ends.
Then your center rod where it connects to the belt, some primaries have a covering over that rod, and if we go to our harvester, that's where our windrow, what word do you use? That's where our windrower dumps in between the 2 rows.
Right.
So there's a massive amount of product on top of those, on top of that center belt, where some of the primaries have covering over them, some don't.
Right.
And do you have an opinion on that, or how that affects?
Well, yeah, the potatoes that are in the hill that you're digging are going to come up the center of the chain.
Yep.
The ones that are in the furrow for your side caster are going to come up that joint between the 2 halves, and there's a lot of things there to get snagged on. And so some of the guys have taken a piece of basically a half a pipe and laid that over that, welded some bolt studs through it, and put some nuts on there with a slope made out of weld bead to kind of gently lift the potato over the nut rather than have it run into it. And so they've shielded that center portion with an arch covering. And so it starts down at the bottom. They kind of bring it to a point right down there where that big piece of flat steel is. And then it gets wider and flatter as the chain comes up. And they take it to within about a foot of the top. By then, the potatoes have all moved one way or the other. And there's nothing left to fall on the ones right at the very top of the chain.
So the only place you could fasten that would be to your spade then?
Right. And also, guys have taken this belting and they've built a little bit of a shield of steel down at the bottom on the side walls of the digger on the primary. And they put the lead edge down there, and this comes up and lays on either the links or the belt of the digger, so that none of that hard metal or the rivets through the belt chain are in contact with the potatoes. They slide up on top of it. And so they've put cushioning everywhere that a potato can get to.
Right now we're 100% exposed to that.
Okay. Well, what percentage I don't know, and it would depend a little bit on field conditions and whether it was a long variety or a round one.
It's mostly all russet.
Okay. Round ones tend to roll more easily than the long ones, so they're harder to get through the equipment without dinging them up a little bit. But the long varieties aren't immune. Any place you've got something moving and something not, there's an abrasion opportunity. And that can take off some skin. There's 3 layers to a potato skin. The periderm, the epidermis, the mesodermis, and the endodermis are the 3 cell layers. And you can take off the first 2 and not really hurt the potato much. But if you get the 3rd one, then you're down to the flesh. And then pathogens can get in. The first 2 are the cosmetic ones, where you say, oh, look, that potato looks all skinned up. The skin wasn't set. And so that's an appearance issue, where if you go through that 3rd layer, now you got another issue to add to it. Did we make sufficient the points about chain speed and ground speed and field conditions?
Yes, we talked about like the rear cross is 50. I just wrote down rear cross to boom, 50% of ground speed. Like
Yeah. Rear cross, side elevator, and boom are all half of ground speed. And
60%.
primary is 1.2 to 1.6. So basically the whole point of the harvester is to separate the crop from the soil and anything that's in the soil. Debris or rocks or corn cobs or whatever. And so the more effectively we can do that with the minimum amount of damage, the better job we've done. And on storage lights, a lot of guys have wired them now onto a timer. So in 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever your normal time in there to kind of check things out is, you turn them on, you got 20 minutes and they're going to go out, so you better carry a flashlight. If you find something you want to spend a little time on, you're going to have to go back and turn them on again. So they put them on a timer so that somebody doesn't forget to shut them off and the top of your pile has got all green potatoes in it. Because it was on for 3 days.
Or let's take about 20 or 30 minutes before they start working.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. And so what do you do different in lighting? Is there any different types of lights that have less of an impact on the greening?
There are a number of concerns there with lights. The fluorescent tubes put out the most UV. And the UV is main ingredient in the greening process. Now, the big concern there that's made fluorescent tubes virtually disappear from storages is the foreign material in the finished product. Processors are absolutely paranoid about glass or metal or anything that gets in that finished product because they know they're going to get a lawsuit from somebody. And so they have almost mandated that nobody uses fluorescent, even if you got shields and everything under it, take them out. The halogen tubes, where they have that long skinny tube, have become the most common because they put out a lot of light. They're not a very big fixture, so they typically mount them either near the catwalk or on top of the plenum, depending on the style of storage. And there's a switch on each one so that you could turn one on if you're just going to work in one spot for a little while and do what you need there and then shut it off and leave. Or if you want more of them on, a lot of times they'll turn them on when they start filling the storage, and as the pile grows, they go up and shut them off individually so they don't stay on while the pile's in there. And so if you got a guy hanging ribbons day by day, do it every day. All the new pile you built, go hang ribbons on it, cut them off right at the surface. Then you've got an indicator of air movement. You've got an indicator of pile settling for the first couple weeks, and then possible shrink or hot spot issues later on.
So how are you connecting the ribbons to your, commonly our buildings are covered with steel on the inside now. How are you connecting ribbons to that?
Duct tape.
Okay.
Just be sure it's dry so that the tape will stick to it. And those ribbons actually will last for years. So if next year you build a little shorter pile, you might want to fix them because they're going to not tell you what you needed about shrink. But if your pile is that height or deeper, then you just cut them off and leave the ones in there.
So you had your pile level and you had your ribbons touching your bulk when you finished filling the storage, and you are monitoring this, and then you say, looking for a number here, 8 weeks later, the pile has settled 4 inches.
Yeah.
Then you have a spot that settled 6 inches. You could have an issue there that you can't tell with your nose yet.
Well, not even with an infrared gun that will pick out hot spots. And the guys who are using that as a tool, they'll walk along and scan the whole storage looking for clues that something's starting to happen, because 2 or 3 degrees is a pretty good indicator that it's not the same as everywhere else.
I don't like the infrared gun because it seems to change. When you use it, the more you hold it on, it seems to warm up and the numbers change.
Yeah.
It's not a...
Yeah.
That's only my opinion.
Well, turn it on and scan, shut it off, walk 5 feet, turn it on and scan, and it should come back to its reset 0 each time. But if you walk around the whole building and, you know, just sweeping everywhere, it could change.
It does. Yeah.
Okay.
And that would be, that should be.
All right.
So do halogen bulbs put out any UV?
They do put some out, yeah. All lights do, especially the white spectrum. But the UV is highest in the fluorescents. They're kind of a little bit bluish, and that's why. And there's some that have some coatings in them that make it more like a warm light, which gets back closer to a 6,000 degree Kelvin color, which is the color of the sun. And
So the names to the processor is the UV or the glass?
the glass,
Okay.
yeah.
How do you feel about the LED lights?
I haven't seen any of those in storages yet. You got some? All right.
I don't know if they're working.
Well, they're by far the most efficient light. You can run them on Cat 5 cable rather than regular wiring, which is a whole lot cheaper. They're low voltage, so there's no hazards to electrocution or anything if something should get exposed to them. They're pretty much weather inert, regardless of whether you got condensation everywhere or not. They don't seem to care. So I think LED is going to completely change the lighting practices of the modern world, but it's going to take a little while to get there. I've talked to a number of builders who are working with electrical consultants to design houses that all the lighting is LED. And you know, talk about energy savings. A couple of them are up in Alaska, where electricity is really expensive. And So anything they can do to cut their electric bill, they're going to jump on it.
What's their cost there per kilowatt?
Oh, it's probably twice or three times what's here.
We're 13 cents.
Yeah. Yeah, they're electric baseboard heater in a house up there will run over $1,000 a month. So you don't want too many of those left on overnight. Get an extra blanket.
You mentioned from the value equivalent of potatoes and crush, so the word you used.
Yeah.
What about when the trucks full of edging? Is there a lot of compression having at that eggs from the truck?
Not too bad, because generally the front slope of the pile and the back slope in the bed has an angle to it. So the depth of the potatoes right there at that opening isn't full bed height.
Right.
So there's not.
Even with the track pushing the pressure against it?
Yeah, yeah. Potatoes are quite resistant to compression. You can put a potato on the floor and put 24 feet of potatoes on top of it, and if you keep the humidity up, that potato will be just fine after 9 months of storage. So they're pretty durable in that respect. But the pounds per square inch when you're lifting heavy soil on a small spot where it's touching that front knife is way more than the pressure in that stack. So it's a case of pounds per square inch kind of thing. And that matters as to whether the cells can handle it or they can't.
Is it possible to go over the loading of the truck procedure again, just because we have operators and truck drivers here?
Sure.
We're going to change a different practice. At the current time, we have a habit of loading our trucks in the rear for traction reasons and in different conditions. So if we got to change our loading habits, then I'm just wondering if it's...
If you need to put weight on your driving wheels to negotiate the slopes, you got to do that. Or dedicate some tractors with a big rope to getting those trucks up the steep spots.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of guys that do that. The bigger farms have lots of tractors sitting around, and so they run them out there. They even run up and down the row and pack the ground so that right after the digger digs them out, they're packing that so the next truck comes by, he's got firm base to drive on.
So you're saying with this loading condition going from front to back consistently for 9 or 10 trips, your truck wouldn't have to be as slow then for field?
Actually, the truck's going to be moving ahead and back quite a bit. He's going to be exceeding the digger speed or slowing down from the digger speed as he moves forward or back with each course in the pile.
How close do you go to the front rack or the back rack of the boom as you're doing your row?
Typically about 2.5 feet. 2 feet is a kind of, you're starting to push it a little bit. If you're on fairly level ground and nothing's going to happen, you can go closer. But if you've got a ditch or something to cross, or a sandy spot, or somebody's going to lose traction or something, then be careful, because those booms don't take to hitting the head gates very well.
Here I've observed that with the people that get their comfort zone, I would say 2.5 inches. They'll run right along steady there, just but operating a harvester or operating a truck, I've done both. One time I used to think I could do it, now I know I can't, but anyway, anything that draws my attention, that's an awful thing to have with you. Today, it never stops buzzing, when you're busy. But if I'm operating the harvester, if the truck driver would not look in his mirror, if he would only stay focused on the harvester operator, I think you would have more success. Okay. And in reverse, if the harvester operator constantly observes the truck driver in eye contact, and then when he suggests a move, always do it lightly and everything, then you have more reason to keep eye contact.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you have any animosity anywhere, it's an awful place to have it, because then that breaks down. So
Yeah, your communication doesn't work.
So what's the best way, have you observed, is there any special techniques that people communicate with, or how they do that?
Mostly it's hand signals.
Yes.
One of the real boosts and tools for growing potatoes and a lot of other crops as well is the GPS system. The harvest operator simply gets his AB lined up on the end of the row and lets the clutch out and turns around, never even looks forward the whole pass. So he's watching what's going on the machine, he's looking at his truck driver, he doesn't care at all about steering. The tractor does that on its own.
You know, it's an awful hard thing not to look in your mirror.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
I know
yeah.
you got to concentrate on the driver, but like, I mean, you're doing both all the time. You're out constantly because you got. I know I got to look in the mirror to see where.
Well, if you're sucking in or out of center with those.
Unless you really trust the fellow that's there, I usually take a look in the mirror just to make sure.
Well, yeah. Whoever had the last chance to save the problem is at fault. It's kind of the way it works.
It's just hard, like I say. I mean, nothing against just looking at the driver, but if you try just to look at the tractor all the time, I don't.
Well, the operator's got to know what's going on the digger before he can decide what to tell the driver.
It's kind of a.
Yeah, just you got 3 or 4 things to look at, and
especially now that you got 3 different in and outs. Now it's going to be.
yeah. Well, it's a learning curve. It's different than what you're used to. The guys that are doing that by about the 3rd day, oh, this is no big deal. We can do this, you know, on our sleep. So you kind of just get used to it.
Oh yeah, especially if you start off.
Yeah. Where we find problems is when I get called onto a farm because the bruise is bad, and I suggest to them that, you know, that 8-foot slope of roll down isn't helping them. Well, how do you solve it? And I give them some ideas, and well, those truck drivers aren't even interested in hearing that. We're already got it dialed in. We're going this way.
So in your pattern, you drew that out a while ago, floating trucks, and most of our truck beds are 20 to 22 feet.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't have any semis, so I was only watching it there. You started. I was assuming that wherever you start, conditions being favorable, you can start at the front of the truck if you wish.
You can, wherever they're comfortable with.
So conditions are favorable, you start at the front of the truck. So if you're loading your truck not dead center, so therefore you're going to load the truck on the right-hand side first. I'm painting this out to see if this is accurate. So you start in the front of the truck towards the right-hand side, and you would probably get your boom up 2 feet, so a pile 2 feet high. Then do you move ahead gradually, or I mentioned that our booms are around 40 inches, or then do you come ahead 6 feet, looking for a number here, and then drop your boom to the bottom again?
No, you're just laying it out as the truck's moving slightly different speed than the digger is.
Okay, and go from one end of your bed to the other. Then when you, in your procedure that you would recommend, I think I'm looking for you to recommend procedure, and then we'll adjust it as we go. But then the next step, once you've loaded the right-hand side of your truck to whatever that comfort level is, then your next step, where do you go?
Well, okay.
Did you not say first you do the center of your truck?
Yeah, that's the bottom of the bed. If you don't do that, they're all going to roll there anyway.
Yes.
So if this is our bed, and here's our pivot for this side rack to fold down. So we're going to build that first tier right in there.
Yeah.
And that's with there's those 3 rubber snubbers or whatever you want to use, so that the middle one is hanging right on the edge of the truck. The driver can see it in his mirror, looks back, it's right there close to it, into 2 inches either way, doesn't matter. And then once you've done that, you can either come to the inside or the outside. That's pretty much whatever you choose. But you're going to want to build this pile. And
okay,
then,
so if you start that middle row at the back, you go to the front. You go to
then
the
it's
front of
just
the truck
pull him in and go right on back.
and go right
Push him
on
out
back.
and go out right forward
Yeah.
again. So you're
So
just,
you're always-
just making loops.
Yeah.
So you don't have to, stop while I get my boom clear up front again and
Exactly.
do another one of
Yeah.
those. And then we just keep adding to these
Yes.
until we've got our load. And then the truck leaves.
And you did say a comfort zone is 2.5 feet.
Yeah, about 30 inches. That gives you no more than a 3-foot slope
So that
for
means
roll
you
down.
go to the front or the back of the truck.
Well, oh, you got the roll down to the sides and you got that roll down on each end. So it's never more than 3 feet. So if your boom's this far away from the head gate of the truck, then the potatoes that are coming down there are going to fill part of that up.
Yeah.
And as you put this second level in, some of those are going to come in there and fill that. So you're going to end up with the same weight in that load either way. And by doing this, the roll down is, the consequences of roll down are virtually eliminated. And that's the whole point, is if they're going to roll down too far, then we got damage. So if we're going to do this in the field, we want to be doing that same kind of thing in the storage. As if we're building 6-foot high tiers and we got 8 feet of roll, we've undone everything we gained out there in the field. So we got to make sure there isn't a weak link somewhere in the line. Anything else you can think of that we should be covering? I know there's a dozen things we haven't talked about, but I can't think of what they are.
No, I guess I didn't know what you were gonna talk about when you came, Steve, and you've covered a lot of topics here. I just, we talked about the speed of our machines. Now, the system, the mechanisms to convey potatoes from one unit to the next. When we come in now to unload our potatoes into storage, the back end of our bulk trucks, we have a tremendous amount of differences in our equipment today. And I don't think we don't have one truck here in the yard, I don't believe, but some of our potato boxes that are made by Linklater in Summerside that have belts in them. The back roller is probably 12-inch diameter at least. It's
That big head roller back there?
it's not
Okay.
that big, but the bulk boxes are, I call them, they're rather bathtub type. They're not just these, but that's the material. The product flows under them quite well, but there isn't any of them that come with any kind of what do you call it?
The let down?
Let-down device. There isn't any of them.
Okay.
And this summer when I was in Winnipeg, the potatoes, the big potato growing area there, but where I was, they were growing round potatoes, mostly the reds.
Okay.
A lot of other parts were reds and yellows. And the part that I saw that handling had been washed, so they were free of dirt. But their trucks that come into a packing house to unload, there was a big round, like a half-moon funnel made out of, I don't use the word Teflon, I'm not sure if I
Or
material name.
white stuff?
But the product flowed down that very slow, and it almost pushed it down there, you know?
Okay.
And I know our russets won't flow that easy, and the potatoes that we're gonna handle here the next month are not free of dirt. But we do have potatoes right now that are starting without a letdown device. They end up going at least 3 feet, because they just come out of the bulk box. If the top of my belt is here, when the box is full, when you open your tailgate, I I know that it's that high to the top of the head, because I can crawl through it, and I'm quite a ways across,
Okay.
so we have that much room, plus the 12 inches or 18 inches of circumference to the roller.
All right.
That product ends up going before it goes up the belt. Now, it doesn't actually free fall, but it flows. And I don't know how to slow this stuff down. I don't know how to handle it and have something that flows.
Well, I would be inclined to look at installing a let-down belt as opposed to trying to change that head roller that's so big,
You know, I don't think
because
that's the design.
that's a lot of work to do that. But if the potatoes, if you put a piece of steel, say 1/2 inch thick steel, about 2.5 inches wide, across there with elevator bolts through it and the belting attached to the top of it, bring that belting up so it's virtually almost touching the belt on the truck. So there's no place for dirt and vines and stuff to start getting wrapped up in there. And then bring it down. As you unload the truck will rise as the springs come back to their original position.
And most of our trucks now are air ride, and most of them adjust themselves. The height pretty well stays the same, but
Okay.
not all. But,
All right.
But just to help you, most of them are.
Okay.
Most of them stay.
If you've got an operator back there at that delivery point, he probably needs to keep checking to see that that receiving unit is up as high as it can be to minimize the drop. And if you've got a let-down belt that's that long and he's up tight in one truck and it comes down, it lays for a foot on the belt, doesn't hurt anything. The next one might end just short of the belt. So it's helping you there. So there's really not much penalty involved in the letdowns, and because everything's moving in a flow. It's kind of like a waterfall. If you would drop all your potatoes together, the first ones to hit are going to be damaged, just like they were dropped one at a time. But everything else is moving at the same speed and stops together.
Now, the next boxes that are coming that I see this year, I have another that's coming to farm here, but it's belt over steel. Where's I don't use the word Rex chain on it. It has a big heavy chain on the side, the flat bars across, and there's a piece of belt.
A flap. Yeah.
I think these flat. I don't think it's continuous, but the roller that goes around the front where it delivers onto the bin powder wouldn't be any bigger than this
Right.
that dish. It's a lot smaller.
There's a lot of semis out west that are that way. They have been for about 25 years.
Yeah, so that, I guess my question to you is those, I'll use the word belt over steel, the flaps.
Yeah.
I mean, the front of that load doesn't move until
Right.
the truck gets half empty, so and do you observe much?
There is some skinning on the potatoes that lay right on that belt. That's just part of the way it works. But it's not serious damage. You can see it. It's visible.
And it does end up being a column, yes.
Yeah. Well, it might be a 2 instead of a 1 just by appearance. But it's not going to shave off half the tuber or, deform it some way that it won't pack. So a lot of those guys use those belts because they use them for other things: sugar beets, carrots, onions, and so that truck has multiple things to deal with, and those are very durable. That chain is super strong. You almost never can see one broke. They might wear out eventually, but they're very durable.
And some of them, they rig up self-oilers on these now on the front of the truck with vegetable oil or food grade oil, I should say. But do you have an opinion on that? Is that
I don't see a negative there, as long as if you're dusty conditions, you might have all kinds of dirt build up because it'll cling to the oil, and it might make it a little bit of a pain to get in there to do something. Try it and see. I don't know for sure whether it's. There's guys that use dry graphite, and a little auger delivery box, and they just dribble graphite on those things, and they don't attract the dust. And so that might be an alternative.
Because here our conditions for the fertilizer that's in our soil, and we have a tremendous amount of damp weather, is material is extremely corrosive. You know, we have severe corrosion here. So,
Yeah.
And they tell us because our air has salt in it, but I'm sure sometimes it does.
Well, chlorine is an essential nutrient. It's one of the ones that a plant must have. If you live within 200 miles of a salty ocean, you don't need to apply any. There's that much in the air. It'll meet the plant's needs nicely. So chlorine is very corrosive. Table salt, sodium chloride. A lot of the fertilizers, the potassium chloride, are very corrosive. And so it's, you know, it's the environment you live in. It's not as bad as like the guys in Idaho that defoliate with straight concentrated sulfuric acid. Those $250,000 big boom spreaders with the high wheels and whatnot, if they get 2 years out of them before they just disintegrate, they're pretty happy. Because that acid is nasty stuff.